VeeFam, what's up? Rob, Mr. Messer back with another episode of the VeeFam sessions. I am over the moon excited for today's guest. Today I have commercial real estate agent, TikToker, host of the CRE Secrets podcast, GiftGo, and unbelievable V friend, Miss Aviva. Aviva, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Thank you, Rob. I am doing amazing. I'm so impressed by your speed. I only met you, was it last week in New York? And here we are, um, putting in
I,
the reps. You're putting in the reps, and I'm impressed. So
it
thank you for
was,
having me.
um, yeah, now that you mention it, it was just a little over a week ago at Gary's birthday in New York. Um, one of the best parts about going to these events is just meeting new V friends. I mean, it's great to get people in your circles, but to meet other like we just said off the recording, just like-minded people. And we got to chatting, and I just I was attracted by your positivity, and as I got to talk to you more, I realized the level that you were playing this game at. But it wasn't until I got like on the plane or that I was just kind of doing like my Twitter, and I was like, oh, like she is a real gangster here. So we will get into that, but I can't thank you enough. You know, for your speed and for agreeing to come on here and tell your story and to talk V friends. So I always like to begin at the beginning. So if you don't mind just giving us a couple minutes version of your Cliff Notes pre NFTs and V friends. Who is
Sure,
Aviva?
sure. So I was born in Denver, Colorado. I still live here to this day. I am a commercial real estate broker, personality, owner, manager, whatever you want to call it. I run around from buildings every day and try to make win-wins for everyone. I I discovered I have a really interesting relationship with and I've been thinking about it a lot with Gary's content and when I started working and when I started into the business. And I've realized this parallel recently where I remember the first time I ever saw a Gary video, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, which was pretty much exactly when I was starting in the commercial real estate industry. And I mean, just hooked immediately. And what I did was ultimately like Gary was and still is this online mentor, and I've just listened so much, so many hours, and just kind of did what he said to do, and watched him and did what he was doing. And um, I mean, my real uh, when the rubber hit the road was during the pandemic when the phone stopped ringing, and I had gone all in on TikTok, but I went all in on TikTok for a page for my cat. And a good friend called me and he was like, "Why are you doing this with your cat? You should do this with your business. Nobody else in your industry is doing it." And that was a light bulb moment in my life, because immediately really just kept with the Gary playbook and putting out content brick by brick endlessly, right? And understanding that um, this is a long term game and I'm in it for the long term. And uh, it thankfully, I've seen a lot of success. The commercial real estate industry is very, like, social media is very taboo, right? It's just completely rejected social media and the internet and social media. And honestly, a lot of the strategies that Gary has shared is what I built my entire company off of. And so I am just smiling cheek to cheek every day when I get up and get to work because it's worked. And I mean, cue the introduction of VeeFriends, had so much fun learning losing, winning, but then ultimately meeting unbelievable like-minded people across the country, across the world, and then sharing this really special passion, which is VeeFriends. And it's been really, really rewarding. And if I had to do it all again, I wouldn't change a thing.
I love that. And just your aura, your overall positivity. I don't know if I mentioned that at the beginning when I was talking about our interaction, but it's very it's just attractive, and you have like this aura where you just pull people in, and that's like the essence of VeeFriends, right? Just like positivity and kindness and all of those things. And you are layered with the hard work and I mean, speaking of reps, and we'll get into that, like your content, like all the time, you're like following the playbook. So I definitely want to get to everything, and especially this point, on November 12th, 2023, in an IG post, uh, covering a special moment that you put together that we'll dive into in a couple of minutes. But you said Gary's content has profoundly impacted my business endeavors, and I run a business completely predicated by his playbook, which is something that so many people, especially that listen to this show, really are familiar with. But and obviously he talks about this in his content too. Like actually executing it is where people get tripped up, and if they do execute on it for 1, 2 months, years, whatever, sometimes there's a fallback. But you've been super consistent, and I like the more I'm listening to you talk, I'm like, man, I could do an hour or two of you with you just on commercial real estate or just on, becoming a content creator. So I'm going to do my best to synthesize all of this. But I'm curious, out of just a fun like Gary Maxey question, like what do you remember the actual piece of content that you were hooked on?
Hilarious question. I think it was definitely one of those videos where he was standing in New York just screaming at the camera.
Fuck You Monday?
And it must have been the Fuck You Monday piece of content. I really think it was, but I'm not 100% sure. But in my head, it is that piece of content, because years later, I kind of heard him talking about the strategy behind that piece of content, which was make a video and essentially retarget it to the right people using Facebook. And that's exactly what happened to me. And it worked, and it completely changed my life over and over and over again. So I just remember it like it was yesterday.
That's so cool. So for those that may not know Aviva, um, she is she's part of this club that has hit 1 million followers on TikTok, which is no easy feat. And she would never. I'm just getting to know you, but there wasn't even a hint where you were anything but absolutely humble and full of humility when I was talking to you. Like I had no idea. I think I was doing more talking about my podcast, and you were just like listening. So like, and by the way, like as I have more events where people from Web3 are getting together IRL, like there's a definite sense of like, I have this many followers. Maybe not so much in VeeFriends land, but I've been to enough events where like there's just that aura where like, I've reached this level, so I'm going to communicate and interact and engage with people that are also at this level. And if I don't know who you are, then you can only have this much of my time. So I do want to give you roses for that, because
Thank
um,
you.
it's something that I notice. I feel like I'm pretty observant. But let's get back to the beginning. So you, like many, got Gary's advice. You're in real estate. Was there a particular moment where you said, "Okay, I'm going from my cat to here, and like this is my plan, this is my goal"? Like, talk to me about that moment when you really started to get serious about it.
Sure. Well, so I want to preface this with um from the age of 18 up until pretty much the pandemic, I was a DJ. And
Yeah.
as in being a DJ and with the music, social media was a huge part of it. And so, but when you're a low-level DJ, there's a high supply of content on the internet and then a very low demand for it, right? People only demand musicians' content once they're really, really big. So for years, I was posting. Nobody ever cared. Nope. It just, never, ever amounted to anything. And at the time, it was hard. But then when I had that moment where my friend was like, you need to post about your job instead of your cat, because there's so much competition with the cat and there's no competition with your profession, I realized that by posting content that was value add to the viewer instead of personally selfish content, right? Flashy, boast, which I learned from Gary. If you post value add content, the people will want to consume it. And so it was like June of 2020 where I had that aha moment where it was like, and Gary said this, he was like, it's really uncomfortable to hold a phone and talk to it. Like, nobody actually likes to do that. It's cringe. It's uncomfortable. However, it converts the best, A. B, it brings the most value to the consumer, which is the point of successful media. And then ultimately, it may be cringe, but when you have 1 million followers, nobody thinks it's cringe anymore, right? All the coolest stuff is cringe until it's cool. And so getting past caring what people think, getting past caring if people think it's cringe, and just testing and being curious and experimental and bringing as much value as you physically can, it's been a really fun journey, and figuring out that is what people want when they are consuming content on any of the platforms, in my opinion.
I love that. And, thinking back to 2020, and if Gary was not, or his content was not on your radar back then, just think about how much he's screaming about VeeFriends cards now, and maybe LinkedIn. 2020, from 19 to 2020, it was all sports cards and TikTok. It was TikTok, 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 TikTok. And me personally, like, I got in, got out, like, I never went full throttle on any one account. So yeah, I'm sure I could have a counseling session in that, but that's for another day. So it's speaking of that, like, you've gone at it for years now, and I'm sure there's been ups and downs. Like, I know the day in, day out is an absolute grind, but I'm curious, like, what did you learn about yourself, assuming that you had ups and downs? What did you learn about yourself during this process of not only hitting, going on this climb, but, I'm sure there was goals along the way. I'm sure there was videos that you thought would be a smash, and maybe weren't, and vice versa. So I'm curious.
I think the biggest thing, it's just authenticity is so ridiculously obvious to everyone that if it's not authentic, anybody, they don't even need to know you, can sniff it out in a second. So authenticity rules. When you get followers, the greed starts, and you're like, oh, I could monetize this, right? And so figuring out my relationship with monetization has been probably the biggest one. And then biggest, I would just say, like, I don't want to say pain point, but point of growth, because you want to go for like the easy money. But then you realize it could be at the cost of your brand and your image, and trying to find the balance there. And it's been really interesting to watch Gary pre-VeeFriends, now during VeeFriends, and his relationship with monetizing his community, just because he's always been very adamant about giving away the content for free. And so, I at one point I had a course, and I know Gary always said don't do that, and it was always in the back of my mind. And I kind of, when I ended it, I felt really good about ending it, just because I kind of felt like what Gary said was right. Like, it was a cheap monetization strategy that like wasn't worth my image as a whole. And so I could do a therapy session on that one. But yeah, it's just figuring out your relationship with monetizing your audience. Yeah, I think about that.
That makes sense. I mean, usually it's the money thing, right? Pricing out any kind of service, or but yeah, totally get that. And just to wrap this kind of TikTok portion of your journey, was I know I took a look at your pin, and if you haven't followed Aviva Real Estate on TikTok and all of the social places yet, do that please, because she is very knowledgeable, and real estate is something that's not part of my everyday life, but it's something that I always like to keep a pulse on. So I was really happy to sub to your podcast and all of your content. But was there one piece of content that jumps out at you? I mean, I saw the Kardashian one. I'm sure there's a funny story behind that, or maybe there's not. But is there one piece of content you were like blown away by the response?
That's such an interesting question, because the Kardashian one's a perfect example where I posted that. I got tens of millions of views, features, everywhere, but very few followers from it, right? So it was like big exposure, and you would expect this pop, and it wasn't that way. And then I would do a different type of content piece, that was like a strategic, showing somebody how to do something that would benefit them in real estate, and I might get a bunch of less views, but I would get more followers. So that is probably that relationship, and understanding that views don't mean follows, right? Like, the whole strategy with the Kim Kardashian video is that I know if I post a video about real estate with Kim's face, it's culture hacking, right? More people will care because Kim's face is there. And that was true. But they didn't care about me in that post. They cared about Kim. And so finding my relationship, ultimately, I have tailored a little back from the culture hacking. I still get like the best views if I say something about Elon Musk or a Kardashian. Um, and really actually just focusing on valuable content that might not get 10 million views, but will help more people and gain and just continue that like brand, they brand, um, loyalty.
100.
Yeah.
I love that. And I noticed how you, at some of the top of some of your videos, you have like a clip that has nothing to do with it, but it's just like engaging, and um, but it makes sense. Like when you're making content at the doing the reps that you are, every little bit helps. So really cool. And you know, I always like to. It's always fun to see someone that's actually doing it, not only consuming Gary, but applying it. That's why I started this podcast. That's why I started doing some writing on LinkedIn, like just pushing yourself to do it and then do it again and get better and get better and get better and get better. I'm sure you weren't using the words culture hack, 3 years ago.
No, no, no. Yeah.
So,
Hey, if it didn't work so well, it would be one thing, but I'm just sitting here watching the results of Gary's free content just working. And it's like,
mm,
oh, got to double down on it, triple down on it. And it's just been nothing but receipts. So,
100. I love that. I love that. So, you started this in 2020. By the time May 2021 rolls around, VeeFriends, like you're in. You're whatever he's selling, you're buying. So tell me about that for you. Did you know what an NFT was? Um, talk to me about your May 2021 experience.
Sure. That was a funny time because um, I was already so loyal to Gary at that time. Like, and he had always never asked for anything that it was like I couldn't have thrown my money at him fast enough um, to mint the beef. I remember that piece of content where he was like, something's coming, you know, but whatever that piece of content was. And it was like, I am, like, get ready. We're about to go in. And it was like, okay. And I did not own any other NFTs at that time. I had crypto, but I mean, it was not to mention, I mean, look, VeeFriends did a really good job at onboarding us, showing us how to buy safely, step by step, which was amazing. Somewhere where I just fell short was I didn't understand anything about sports cards or collector's items. So like I knew I wanted the gift goat because that made the most sense to me. But then when it came to buying like any of the characters, I didn't know anything about specs. Like I didn't know a core was different, and so had I known what I know now, and I'm sure everybody feels that way. I would have bought differently. Um, but bought a couple cores, got my goat, and it's just been. I mean, I check it every single. I check the just what's for sale every day because I'm always ready to snipe when the time is right.
I love it. So your belief in Gary, like you didn't need to know the applications. You didn't need to know like, what storybook is my character going to be featured in. You just had that belief from the results you were seeing, like just a blind belief in him. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, it was like so many hours of listening and understanding and feeling like I know him as a person. Like I have empathy back toward, he taught me empathy. I have empathy back towards him that I believe that he's not going to do all of this to ruin his reputation for that cash grab. And he hasn't, right? Like he's done nothing but build and put in the work. And I know this is controversial, but I think everything that's happened is exactly what he said was going to happen. So I'm sitting back, just long-term hold, and enjoying the ride. I think, something that I work in commercial real estate, you talk about like the term of an investment, short term, medium term, long-term hold. And it was funny when I jumped into Web3 because a long-term hold in commercial real estate would be like generations. Whereas a long-term hold for some people, right, that's all just your own perspective, might be 6 months as a long-term hold. So when I bought my VeeFriends, just being really accustomed to my version of a long-term hold, it was like I plan on having these my entire life. So um, it's not about the floor today or tomorrow. It's just about the work and the effort and the community and the fun
Hmm.
stuff that we get to do as a result.
100%. And speaking of that, when we met in Brooklyn, one of the questions that I don't know if you remember me asking you, but I was like, "Are you a happy goat?" Um, because we'll get into it, but without hesitation, you said yes. Um, and I'm asking that because speaking of investing, like there's a lot of, and I'm not close to it. I'm not obviously in the goat Discord. I don't own a goat, but just I have what I like to think is a pretty good pulse on the community. And I know there are a lot of unhappy goats. So I'm curious, and I mean, maybe there's a great parallel with investing in real estate. Like is it because people just over leverage themselves too hard? Is it because of those Gary talked about something in your driveway? Like as someone that's a little closer to that, I'd love your take on it.
It's hard, and it's been a crazy journey because I think at the beginning, like I know like Gary was amped. Like he was so excited and he knew what he could do and how he could deliver on it. And I think to a lot of people, they just saw dollar signs. And then as the gifts started to roll, that was the play with a lot of the gifts, or like these are collector's items that you're to hold on to. That was the first year of gifts, was like, this is going to be big in 20 years. And people were like, wait, we thought this was the flip life. Like, I need that Lambo in my garage per that hint. And so obviously, there have been highs and lows, and it's, nobody would feel bad for me. Like, we use that June oven every single day. I love my June oven. I will keep like we have we kind of joke in my house, like we have a couple of GaryVee shrines throughout, which is just like the artwork and the books and the jackets and
Chairs now.
the chairs. I know, we just got them 2 days ago, which is exciting. And but the goat chat has been so difficult, and just being a goat has been difficult, and I empathize with, people did spend a lot of money on goats, and I empathize because yes, 2.5 years in, the return isn't there, but I see it as a dividend producing asset, and I think it'll pay off in the long term. And I hope my other fellow goats can be a little nicer and happier in the chat, because it's a long-term game and it's a long-term play and it's fun. But like I said, I do empathize because people are mad, and I'm sad that they feel that way because I'm having fun.
With that, we're talking about May 2021 like it's light years ago, but we're still in the year 2023. It's been a year, 2.5 years. So when you're talking about investing, it's really not that long. But yes, I definitely empathize. I've had conversations with like random people at like the hotel bar at VeeCon, like really getting into it and just trying to see that perspective, which has been enlightening. So it's really interesting, and a big part of what I'm doing here is just getting kind of the historical perspectives during all these moments. And I think this is a very like this whole Go community saga, for lack of a better word, is very interesting, especially as we get into a place where Go 18 Gift 18 has been delivered, and now it's like what happens next, or maybe he drops an announcement pre Gift 18. So we'll have to stay tuned.
Hey, I just want to say that I bought my podcast Panther with 0 redemptions on it.
I was gonna bring that up. That's amazing.
0 redemptions, and walked up to Gary and pitched him on a podcast, and he said yes. There is no way all of these, I don't know. I mean, he said it over and over and over again. The thing about Web3 and the smart contracts is that we can add to them. And the way that Gary has always taught me to do business and the world is provide more value than the other side, right? Jab, 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 right hook. And you could not convince me that at the end of the 2 years for the podcast Panther, or the end of the 3 years for the gift goat, that the party's over. I think the party's just getting started.
I'm with you there. With that, I was going to bring that up. A phenomenal story. Would you mind, like, I don't think there's a person listening that wouldn't have an ask for Gary. Would you mind taking us to that moment? Oh, there's the cat. What's your cat's name?
This is Weston.
Weston.
He's one of them.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen many different kinds of cats in your videos. That's amazing. Well, hello, Weston. Welcome to the show. If you don't mind taking us to that moment with Gary when you throw a right hook at him, I mean, it's a great time. His birthday, you bought the NFT. You jump to that moment if that's okay.
Yeah. Look, I would say that leading up to this, what were a series of like chess pieces that were played over many years to get to there. It's like so hard to explain, but long story short, the culmination was maybe 5 or 6 months ago. First off, like I said, I'm watching what's on the market for VeeFriends like a hawk. And I had gotten some liquidity because I felt like this was the right time to buy an access token. I didn't know which one. I just knew I wanted one. And I was just going to wait until the right one came. And I remember it was a Friday afternoon at like 3 o'clock. And I get this like, oh, I should look at the like what's for sale. And I'm like scrolling, and there was a podcast Panther for like 5 ETH. And I remember historical sales on the podcast Panther were bonkers, like hundreds of ETH. And I couldn't have stopped everything faster and just scattered to buy it because I knew if I could buy it, even though it had no accesses left, that I could get the podcast done. So I buy it. I'm like beaming. I couldn't believe, right? To me, it was one of like the top access tokens that I never expected I would ever own, because the very one that I bought, Mohit, had sold for like 130 ETH, which is like $300,000 the year before. And so it just seemed unattainable, but I saw it and I was prepared for this moment and I got it. And so from then it was like, okay, how do I get Gary, how do I move this piece forward? And I met Gary at VeeCon. I've been a very loyal follower for years. I've emailed him back and forth a couple times, and we've created, very, very distant relationship. It's meeting up people on the internet is weird, specifically like when one is your idol. And but I knew that another aside is my family has a company where the brand ambassador for the company is William H. Macy, who's a really famous actor. And it finally dawned on me that I could connect William H. Macy and Gary. If I could get Bill on Gary's podcast, it would kind of be another chess move closer.
Oh, you had.
Exactly. And I knew that Bill was arguably more famous than Gary. So I realized that Gary would probably say yes if I could get to him. So I emailed him. I didn't even ask Bill if he would go to New York or for permission, which was wild. But I reached out to Gary and he was like, let's do it. We set it up, got Bill on the podcast. That was 2 weeks ago. And then Gary had this access event last week, and it was like, okay, I was just in his office with him 2 weeks ago with Bill. He knows who I am. There's no question about this. I have to go back to New York for the access event and ask and do the right hook. And so at the access event, I have the podcast Panther. I have a podcast. I put in the reps to get there. And at the event, I just went up and pitched it to him, and he just said yes immediately. So now I got to work on getting that through the finish line.
That's amazing. And he says timing is everything. So that was a very well-timed, well thought out right hook. Very, very deserving. And like real estate is one of his niches that he enjoys. Like, his sister's a real estate agent. A lot of his keynotes are at real estate events.
Yeah.
So it makes all the sense in the world. I think you could have had a podcast on anything with that story, and he would have said yes. But
I just want to mention something. You talk about real estate and Gary and the Bill Macy interview, and there's something that happened that I wasn't expecting and was blown away by. And even Bill was blown away by it when we were there. So Gary's office it's 60,000 square feet of, so it's an entire floor in like a it's a very famous office building complex in New York. Stunning, new, unbelievable real estate. We get up into, and you have to understand, I go into office spaces day in and day out that are empty, desolate, sad, just dead, right? We get into the VaynerMedia office and it was so alive. It was like you could feel it in the air, and every corner was filled with people who were having fun and enjoying the work, and it was such an alive atmosphere. And it was a big office, huge office filled with just young, vibrant, excited people. And we were all really taken aback by that, because you can feel it. Like, that energy was something you can't make up, right? And it was just so authentic and so real. As someone who's like followed Gary for so long, I just never expected that. And it was cool. It was very cool.
It was so cool, and just I didn't even know who you were then, but I saw it, and I was like, wow, that's one. The first thing was like, all right, what's the connection between William H. Macy and Gary? And I was like, oh, maybe he's investing in this little like distillery now. But then hearing your story behind it, like, is amazing. And on this whole subject, like, how do you give Gary value, right? He like the ability to do that and be thoughtful. And if anybody really put time and thought into it, I'm sure we could. But to be on your toes, have that at the forefront and be able to deliver on that is pretty amazing. So really, really awesome. And it turned out to be a great interview. And I pretty much listen to every interview Gary does. It was really cool to have him interact with someone of that nature, a legend, William H. Macy. And if you don't know who William H. Macy is, please IMDb him right now. He is a living legend. That's so cool, that you were able to do that and go to Vayner. And from what I hear, I've yet to experience it, but I've heard it's very palpable, the energy.
You'll get in there, I have no doubt.
So you mentioned you met Gary at VeeCon. Quickly, going into this was like the utility that you could grasp on, your VeeFriends NFT. If it wasn't an access token or a gift code or anything, was a ticket to VeeCon. It was kind of this mysterious event. There was a couple trailer videos, but we didn't know really what to expect. What was your thoughts, if you could take yourself back to May 2022, your thoughts going into it? Who did you go with? How was your experience? All of the things from VeeCon 1.
Great question. I had never seen Gary speak or ever, so I was really excited. You say, who'd you bring? I brought my dad and one of my husband's best friends, who was just like really into Web3. So he was like all about the flip life and NFTs, less about Gary and VeeCon, but we all we all schlepped over to Minneapolis, and I thought it was a under promise, over deliver event. I was really impressed by it. I mean, the people are the best part, just meeting like-minded people who are equally as enthusiastic about the qualities that attract us to the content. And I did not expect to meet Gary. I had no expectations for that until they rolled out the Meet Gary booth, which was crazy in and of itself, that Gary would stand there every day for hours and hours, just signing, shaking hands, talking. Like, I have a lot of energy, I'm social, but I cannot imagine what that is like to like just have people and pouring their hearts over you for just hours and hours and hours and hours.
And he
And
doesn't take a sip of water. If you watch him, I've never seen him take a sip of water.
it's truly something else. So on Sunday of VeeCon 1, my dad did not. He opted out. He was like, "No, fuck that." But my friend Andrew and I stood in line for 4 or 5 hours. Had a blast and probably had the best time. The concerts were epic. Wyclef was amazing. But um my friends, or I stood in line, met a bunch of amazing people. We got to the front. It was Gary and his dad, and I was so overwhelmed. Like I was crying so hard. I literally could barely speak. It was so ridiculous. I think back now and I'm just like, "Oh my God." But I had a at that point in the line, they were like, "We're not signing anything anymore." And I had my gift code jacket on, and I like just really wanted him and his dad to sign it. And I'm just like crying and I can't talk. And I was like, "Can you please sign this?" And like he couldn't have like thrown a Sharpie at me faster. They were just, him and his dad were just so sweet and empathetic and kind. And uh I never thought in my life I would wait 5 hours to meet somebody, but it was probably a highlight of the entire conference. Besides the concerts. The concerts were lit. Those were so fun.
They were. Um, and this year too, this I mean 2023, um, I think definitely over delivered. Both conferences over delivered, but like the production quality and just the energy, like it was like you were going to an event, like a concert. Especially the first one with Busta. I don't
Yeah.
know. Did you go to that one at the amphitheater?
I regrettably, are you talking about VeeCon 2?
Two, yeah. I
I
just, without saying anything, I just skipped over 1 year.
Unfortunately I could not go to 2, but I will be to
Oh,
3.
okay.
So, I'll see you there.
Let's go. But yeah, but when Gary like started dancing with Wyclef and like put on the hat, like what a great moment that was.
I remember it like it was yesterday. It was epic.
So like, and I think I'd be remiss without saying we're talking about him interacting with people for hours on end, pouring their hearts out, talking about everything that they've done for him, but the energy that he gives back and the level of presence for interaction after interaction after interaction is something that's unprecedented, I think, because he's really listening and he really remembers and he's really just engaged and locking eyes and just in it with you, which is remarkable.
You know what? You know, with my experience jumping online and meeting people online and creating community, sometimes I have a hard time remembering people. And I'm just like, how am I supposed to remember all these people? Like, there's so many. And then I've had that like moment of introspection or whatever the word is, where it's like, no, like Gary does it. Like Gary interacts with an exponential number more than me, and he genuinely remembers these people. Like, uh, you look at their face, and I can retain it. Like Gary does it, and to an extent that's unbelievable and effortless. And it's made me just rethink my relationship with people, because it's like I'm doing 1% of what he's doing, and
Yeah,
it's
like
and he really
it
does
is
remember. And
crazy, and
it's like so
he
crazy when
just
you look at
an
him in the
awesome
eyes,
role
because you can
model.
just like see the empathy in his eyes. Every time I've met him, there's that concern of like fallen hero syndrome, meeting somebody you idolize and they're a dick. And I've never had that with Gary. It's always been like, oh my God, like this guy is more kind and empathetic than I even thought, just by looking into his eyes. It's a crazy thing. He's a good dude.
Yes, one the best. And I think it might be me or you. Like if I accidentally talk over you, it's because you're frozen for a hot sec.
You're good.
So
I hope.
just I don't know if it's coming through for you. But I'll fix that on the back end.
No worries.
Um, with with VeeCon, and you said you had to meet people. Are you someone that taps into the Twitter Spaces, Discord, as far as engaging with other V friends? Where do you live mostly?
Good question. Mostly, I would say most of them are like people I connected with in person, and then I see them on Instagram for the most part. Then the Twitter element is a big one, and the Discord. Now, there's a funny thing about Twitter and Discord, and that's that people will have a profile picture of a VeeFriend or whatever, and I'll get to know them as just JPEGs
Hmm.
and then their profile picture. And then I'll be standing with them and I don't know who they are because their profile picture has always been the picture of a gift goat. And so there's this funny thing where it's like, like, I need to meet you and see your face to understand who you are. You know, in the GOAT Discord, E22 is super active. When you and I were at that bar in Brooklyn and I was leaving, I think Jeremy or Constantine, who I was stoked to meet Constantine. I already met Jeremy. He's awesome. Um, Constantine, who I'd seen a lot in the Discord, he was like, "This is E22." And I was just like, whoa, like you have just a random picture. Your username is E22. I have no context on who you are. And now you're standing right in front of me. And I feel like I know you, but I've never interacted with you. So it was just, it's a funny, like, disconnect for me that I'm working to put the pieces together. But ultimately, it's that, like, people I'm meeting at these events. And then we follow each other on socials and keep in touch thereafter.
I love that. Yeah, it is a weird world that we live in. I remember from VCon 1, someone shouted my name because my PFP is my face. So people know me um, if they know me, if they engage with me. But someone was like Rob, and I turned around and I knew the voice. I knew exactly who it was, but wasn't quite sure like what they looked like. So I'm like looking around for like someone would like be waving their arms at me or like hey, come have a hug or something. But it was just one of those awkward, funny moments where I remember like, oh, I don't know what this person looks like, but I know exactly what they sound like because I hear them on Twitter Spaces 5 times a week. Um, yeah, Web3 is a funny place, or at least a funny chapter, as we kind of figure out how we're going to engage and interact. Um, but
Definitely.
VeeFriends, Gary has said that VeeFriends is a community in a sea of non-communities. That's one of those like flagship quotes. I'm curious. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot. What does that word mean to you, community?
Sure. I mean, it's you know, it is a word that Gary has said a lot, and I have explored my relationship with it since, he talks about community being the foundation of a business or a company. Um, I come from a really, really connected community back home. Like, my entire friend group are people that I met in kindergarten, and they're my best friends to this day. And so I have a really tight knit community, and I see um, the value in that. And I realize a lot of people don't have that tight knit community that they can go home to. And so understanding that I already have that community in my life has been everything. Then parlaying it into VeeFriends and seeing the way that Gary works to build community within a business is just super interesting because it's extremely effective. A, and then B, like it's that ultimate feeling of like belonging. That is community, and by Gary creating that community around VeeFriends, that's how you make lifelong That's how you make lifelong customers. And like, I'm not joking when I tell you I have a closet full of the VeeFriends stuffed animals for if and when we pop out kids. Like, they're not getting anything else but the gratitude gorilla. Like, that's going to
It's
be their
done.
best friend.
It's done. And it is one of those special moments. As someone that my son, who's 5, loves Practical Peacock, it is special, and
No.
it just makes it that much more bigger in the vision and everything more special. I love that. I love that answer. Um, Real quick, couple of things before we head into our last segment. There's so many people that are kind in this community, and most of them full of humility, like yourself. But I always like to ask people, would you call someone out in a good way? Is there anyone in that you've seen maybe in Discord or at an IRL event that you'd like to give roses to for maybe something they did, or just the kind of person that they are, the kind of VeeFriend that they are?
Yeah, I would say I would throw roses to Corso. I think Corso is like a super underrated individual, and he's super humble, and I think he's a really important puzzle piece to this community, and I think he's a lot more important than anybody understands, but he doesn't act that way. I barely know him. You know, I say hi to him, and he's just been nothing but lovely. So I'm going to give roses to Corso.
I love that. Yes, Corso's the puzzle piece. Like if it were missing, you'd be like, "Fuck it, I'm throwing away the whole thing." Like if you were missing that puzzle piece, like you're just not keeping any of it. Yeah, Corso. Shout out Corso, the only person that's been on this podcast twice so far. So he's a historical figure in my world as well. The other question is, what VeeFriend, what character do you feel like you need to spend more time with
Oh
to
my God.
get their juju, their by osmosis?
I mean, do you mean like from a quality standpoint?
Yeah,
Or
what characteristic do you feel like you need to embody more, thus you need to hang out with this person or creature?
that's a good one. Oh my gosh. Observant oyster. Is it observant oyster? Oh
Yep.
geez. Okay, the oyster, I could do that. Maybe the authentic anaconda. Um, Positive. What's the positive? Hmm.
Positive
Optimistic.
porcupine.
Yeah. Well, you know, just all those empathetic elephant. It's really just like all of those high level qualities that Gary was teaching us um up until the very lucky black cat dropped, and I'm just dying to get one, but
Mm.
that seems like a long play.
Well, I mean, so far you're knocking down everything you've wanted. You're getting so as far as that you've shared with me. So I think you're well on your way. But authenticity, like I feel like I watched 20 of your TikToks uh, in prep for this, and I feel like you are like you just scream authenticity through your content. And I think you mentioned that at the top, like, and I think people really resonate with that. You know, you're taking something that could be very cut and dry and boring and making it fun and digestible. So, I read authentic.
Well, thank you. I think the big thing is like when it comes to posting content, if you don't love it, if you don't genuinely love it, it's not a long-term thing. Like you just can't continue doing it at the quality and quantity that you would need to really be successful. So I just feel very fortunate that I love what I do enough to just be willing to shovel, build brick by brick every single day.
I love it. Um, Aviva, thank you so much for coming on. Like I said, you were super awesome, and then to just to hear your story and to know, you know, that you have put in the work and like listened and executed, and just came out the other side. Still an amazing person, and just you know, spreading that joy and kindness. I love it. So thank you for coming on. I wanted to remind everyone one more time before we go to our last segment. Follow Aviva Real Estate. I think you're the same handle everywhere, right? Insta, TikTok,
Yes.
Twitter, the CRE Secrets podcast. Even if you're not in the field, some great information there. Real quick, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but now since it's just popped in my brain, what's like your one bullet point blanket answer for someone that says commercial real estate's like there's so much empty commercial real estate right by my house now. Everyone's working at home. Like, why invest in commercial real estate when everyone doesn't need office space?
Sure. What I would say to that is office is one small piece of the commercial real estate market as a whole. And so if you have, I like to say it's like a tentacle on an octopus, right? You have an octopus with 8 tentacles. Office space is one of the tentacles. An octopus, although I don't know much about octopi, I think it could live with 7 tentacles. And so, yes, while certain product types like office space are suffering, other product types are thriving. Like, I work in warehousing mostly. If you look everywhere in your house, every single thing in your house was once in a warehouse, right? So that the way that e-commerce, or excuse me, the way that the internet impacted office space is the same way that the internet impacted warehouse space. One is just suffering and one is thriving. And that's just the reality of a cyclical world which we're in. The internet is impacting everything we do, and we have to, you have to adapt and get used to that adaptation instead of just writing something off, being like, commercial real estate's dead because everybody's working from home. On to the next. That it's the adaptable ant, and understanding that just because one thing is happening and that might be a headline in the media doesn't mean that you should come to a conclusive decision for anything. So
Right. I appreciate your perspective. I knew it was like an NFTs or scam kind of thing. I just wanted to hear it from the expert herself. And that's a real bar. Everything in your house was once in a warehouse. That makes a ton of sense. And shout out to you for using octopi just flawlessly and correctly. So this last segment is called Micro Macro Spitfire. I'm going to throw a bunch of quick questions at you, and you can answer really briefly and shortly in the macro, or explain and elaborate on your answer with your microscope. So here
okay.
we go. Who is someone that needs let me run it back. If you were just getting into VeeFriends for the first time, who is someone that needs to be followed in the community right now?
You.
No, that's too kind. Favorite teacher you had growing up and one reason why?
I had this Hebrew teacher in the 4th grade. Her name was Ayelet. She was like fresh out of the army, and she was just a drill sergeant, and she made us learn Hebrew like we were in the army, and it worked. So
Let's go. The first NFT you ever minted?
my anchovy.
Amiable anchovy.
My amiable anchovy.
Very cool. If a brand or artist or celebrity, influencer, what have you, came out today and said they were dropping an NFT project, who would that have to be for you to drop everything and go ape in right now?
Dr. Dre. Because Gary already did it.
Your favorite gift so far?
The King Saladin print with the Shaq event was iconic, and the June oven.
Nice. A secret talent you have that most people don't know about?
I am a little intuitive. I kind of know what's going on around. A little psychic.
Nice. Bougie hotel or hiking and camping in the woods?
Bougie hotel.
Wine, beer, or coffee?
Oof. Coffee.
Favorite concert you've ever been to?
I saw Dr. Dre at Coachella with the Tupac thing and all these other amazing rappers. Definitely that one.
Nice. Gratitude Gorilla or Patient Panda?
Patient Panda.
If you had to wipe out all of your social media except for one app, which app would you keep?
Oh my gosh, probably Instagram. Right. Oh no, YouTube. YouTube.
You keep YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Along similar lines, if you had to give away, sell, liquidate all of your VeeFriends possessions, physical possessions, you could keep your NFTs and keep only one piece of memorabilia. Which one would you keep?
The the very first Gift Goat jacket that Gary and Sasha signed when I was crying in their
From
face.
VeeCon 1. Beautiful. Would you rather have a 2-hour group dinner event with Gary, you, and 9 other people, or a 10-minute one-on-one?
10-minute one-on-one.
And the question that I always ask, if you could ask Gary one question, what would it be?
Oh my God. I've been figuring this out too, because now I'm like, oh my God, I have to like make the best podcast ever and ask him questions that he hasn't always asked. If I could ask Gary oh my God. If I could ask Gary one question ever, it would probably be a selfish question about my business, like give him context to my industry and how my industry's hated the internet or social media. And then it would be like, how would you get more followers, or not followers, more commercial real estate clients? But I feel like I know the answer to that. So I don't know what I would do.
It's a hard question.
Yeah, I know. I know.
I would niche down too, probably. But some people have asked me like, why don't you ask Gary to be on your podcast? I'm like, I'm just not there yet. Like, to your point, exactly. Like, I consume a lot. Like, I know what he's going to say before he says it a lot of the time, and I have strong conviction that I'm going to get that time with him. But I just want, like, to your exact point, I want to make the most of it. I want it to be memorable. I want it to be valuable for him. So I feel like I'm still like putting in the homework and putting in the reps to come up with like thoughtful questions. But I do have some good ideas, so I'd love to throw some ideas your way.
Hey, and you talk about giving roses and putting in the reps, and I just want to shout you out because VeeFriends content, like I've thought about it, right? Like I should put out VeeFriends content. Like I love this shit. And then you like look at Jeremy, who's like a complete savage. And I just could never do it to the extent of someone like you or Jeremy, but I admire it wholeheartedly. And I love it and I consume it, and you will get your time it's another way where it's like it'll happen. You will get there. But also having that element of self-awareness that like I'm not there yet, right? And then one day you'll figure out when you're like I am and I'm ready to strike. And it will come because you're putting in the work.
I appreciate that, Aviva. I appreciate that. Yeah, the one question I asked him just at his birthday, real quick, I was like, "Is VeeFam, like, I know he's following VeeFam sessions, but he follows everybody. Like, is VeeFam sessions on your radar?" And he said yes, and that's all I need to know. Like, has it crossed your radar? And so that was cool. I like, this was so fun. I can't thank you enough. I could have nerded out on like TikTok stuff or commercial real estate. Like, oh, I heard Cody Sanchez say this. Like, what do you think? But like to get your overall scope in this conversation, I really enjoyed. And again, folks, follow Aviva. She has just amazing content and has put the blueprint out there for what you do. A, by following Gary, it works. And B, like if you just stay consistent for a lengthy period of time, like good things will happen and opportunity will present itself. So thank you enough. Hope you have a great rest of your Thanksgiving weekend with your family and your cats. Shout out Weston. And hopefully we talk real soon.
Thank you, Rob. It was so great to meet you just a quick week ago. Thank you for having me. And I would love to do another podcast again soon. So don't be shy.
Awesome. I will not. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good one.